Welcome, everybody, to Mindrolling. I'm Raghu Markus with another episode of this podcast. And for those of you who can see, because you're watching and listening to this podcast on YouTube, by the way, all of our podcasts are available on YouTube, if that's convenient. And certainly, like the Mindrolling ones, or I video all of them. So I kind of like seeing people myself. But so for those of you who can see, you see this big poster. I'm going to move aside. Becoming Nobody, this new Ram Dass film, which I've been telling everybody all about for some time. Everyone's busy being somebody, says Ram Dass. And the message here is that it's going to be available finally, because it's been in theaters throughout the fall of 2019, and in January 2020 it will be available as a download or a DVD. So look at Ram Dass, check out ramdass.org, or join, if you are not on the email list of ramdass.org, please do get on it, because we have all sorts of wonderful offerings that are free and so on, and you'll be able to know when this film is available. So, and by the way, there's lots of people who did join and they can't, we get mail like, I never get anything from you. And basically, you got to look in your spam bucket and get that fixed up, okay? So I also want to welcome a new supporter and sponsor, and it's a company called Follow Your Heart. I have known about them and followed that heart for a long time, especially when I was in LA, when I had a record company here. And they have a product called Vegenaise, which is an egg-free mayonnaise that I cannot more highly recommend. I told them, aside from whatever announcements we give about this particular product, it's available everywhere, okay? Everywhere, not just Whole Foods and those kinds of more conscious, shall we say, stores, although it's all owned by Amazon. Gee whiz. But so it's easy to get, and it is just something I use for everything, from salads and making your own dressings to using it for, I just had some eggs. I know not everyone eats eggs, but I do. And mixing in Vegenaise with those eggs and a little salt's unbelievable, okay? All right, I haven't done any recipe programs yet. So check it out, all right? Check out Vegenaise by Follow Your Heart. And of course, we also have to shout out to 1440 Multiversity. Go to 1440.org. Sharon Salzberg and Omid Safi, both of whom have podcasts on the network. They have something great going at the end of January, into weekend, the last weekend in January, starting the 31st. Called Path of the Courageous Heart. That would just be fantastic. That's right near Santa Cruz, California. It's an absolutely beautiful campus. So those are a couple of the things that are going on. Now, to the podcast. Now, you may remember, have I mentioned, we did the Ojai Ram Dass Immersion Retreat. We do them twice a year. That's something else worth getting on the list. And we have many spots we make available for the Ojai retreats for people who are not able to afford going to weekend workshop. Well, this is actually Thursday through Sunday night, so it's like a four-day thing. So those are becoming available too. So check out, the next one will be, I gotta think, Memorial Day weekend 2020. Okay, so you got plenty of time. Figure that out. And the interesting thing is what happens at these retreats. So I did a thing with Lama Surya Das, who was at the retreat. And we had a beautiful conversation. The whole retreat was around guru and devotion, devotion and the guru. And he's he's done a lot of practice, Lama Surya Das, like a few stints at 3 years, 3 days, 3 hours in a cave. In this case, it was probably a room in France where he did these things. So he's done a lot of practice, and he met Neem Karoli Baba, and then he had many. In Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba became his root guru, as he calls it, but he has others like Karmapa and Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche and many others that he has studied with. So he is. We had a wonderful chat that really brought together bhakti, the yoga of devotion, with Buddhist wisdom, basically. But what happens at these things is just a beautiful coming together of people in one heart, as if they were joined together. It's what Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, he said to us once, the same blood runs through all of our veins. And the way that magnetism through this heart practice, the way that magnetism happens is extraordinary, and I've seen it. I've seen it in the Ojai retreats that we do. I've seen it in Maui at the retreats we do there, and I've seen it. I just came back a month ago from working with Saraswati on the yatras that would take people following in Ram Dass's footsteps. I mean, it's just a fantastic retreat, going around to all of the places that Ram Dass and I and Krishna Das and others were with Maharaji in Land of the Gods, as KK, as it is called. He has a book called Deva Bhumi, which means Land of the Gods. So that trip is extraordinary for the same reason, and then for the reason of actually being in these incredible holy spots where these siddhas like Maharaji walked. And on that one, there's one coming up March 13th for 10 days. Go to nourishinglife.com/yatra. And I highly, highly recommend for anybody who wants to go to India and is in any way concerned, which you should be, navigating that without knowing what you're doing. This is all taken care of by Saraswati's beautiful staff of people, both Western and Indian. So that's all of the commercials that we can do today. And here is, so I told you that this talk comes from this retreat with, it was with Lama Surya Das and Nina Rao and Saraswati Markus and myself, and at this beautiful camp that we found, campgrounds in Ojai, California, where we're now ensconced. And I want to read just, there's one quote that Surya Das mentioned, actually, from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and this goes to the core of satsang, of like-minded community, why we come together in this way. One major reason. Well, this couldn't be more major if you tried. We need each other to become enlightened. This is not, we are interdependent. This is such a strong message. It cuts through all of the kind of polarity that we see all around us and within us. And as he said, Surya, we can develop warm, empathic compassion, not just cool, calm, discriminating awareness, wisdom, which is what for me, especially Buddhism in general, but certainly Tibetan, these lamas that have come along in the last 100 years, and lamas that we have actually met and are still with us. It's pretty incredible to see the kinds of transmissions that are available to us at this point. So, yeah, we can develop that warm, empathic compassion And that, along with the discriminating awareness wisdom, is a tremendous feature of what we do in all these circumstances, because Ram Dass certainly represents that combo, and that's why we have Buddhist teachers at every one of our retreats that we do through Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. So there you go. This is pretty great. I told some pretty nice stories about Westerners' experience with Neem Karoli Baba, and Surya Das told stories of his experiences with the likes of Karmapa and Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. So it's a lovely, lovely intersection of two really, I can't think of the word. What's the word for the way in which these two paths, it is said that all paths, once you get to the top of the mountain, they are the same. So I think of these two paths, that you can tread that path using both of the arms of it, shall we say. So I'm really, it's the thing that makes me most proud about these retreats that we put on, wherever they may be, from India to California to Maui. So please do enjoy this podcast on Mindrolling on Be Here Now Network. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com and check all of them out. I mean, there's some just fab. David Nichtern, I've been talking about, he's got that new book to check out, and he's doing some podcasts with pretty marvelous people, so check that out as well. And we will see you next week. Namaste. So this is it's a couple of stories, just to give you a feel of Maharaji beyond the kind of aphorisms that are out there that everybody knows, Sabek, all that stuff. So Balaram Das took this picture, took many of the greatest pictures of Maharaji. He let him have total access. He followed him everywhere. No, we couldn't find Maharaji, and we finally found him. There, Balaram would be there. I mean, he drove Ram Dass completely crazy, because he wouldn't do anything except for his own self-interest, which was great. It was the self-interest of just being in that thing. He couldn't leave. Of course, it took him like 10, 15 years to get over it when Maharaji left, but other than that. So this is from Balaram. I'd like to say something about how we were received, not only by Maharaji, but by the Indians there. In spite of the fact that we did offensive things culturally, but somehow they didn't care. I guess they said, well, first of all, they're not doing it on purpose. They're ignorant. Second of all, Maharaji doesn't seem to mind, and so they didn't mind either. They certainly were generous and tolerant to an extreme degree. I'd go to the temple and watch the way the Indians would express their devotion. I saw that some would take an apple, peel it, slice it, and put it on a leaf plate. I saw them do that several times and thought, I could do that. So I got an apple, and I had my Swiss Army knife and my leaf plate, and I peeled and sliced the apple. Maharaji was sitting there talking with a few people, and he looked at me holding the plate of apple slices towards him. When I would do something like this, he would get this look of amazement. It was as if your dog sat up and talked to you, and you'd look and say, my God, he talks. Look what he can do. He's so cute. Maharaji looked at me with this beautiful look, so much love, you can't even describe it. This is Balaram. Let me find, there's another one that's really... Oh, here it is. This is Ramdev. Yeah, you remember Ramdev?
Sure.
Ramdev, who has been here actually and done one of our retreats. He's like, and he does podcasts on our Be Here Now network. He's like he got a PhD in statistics or mathematics from Stanford. Okay, that's how he's like a brainiac, Ramdev. So here he is in this complete bhakti thing, you know. I had this experience where Mohan and I, another one of our brothers, and a couple of Westerners were there with Maharaji and a bunch of Indians. He and Mohan were talking about the price of skim milk in America. And they were going on and on and on. He asked Mohan, how much is a kilo of skim milk in America? And Mohan would say X number of rupees, and Maharaji would say, can you believe it? Can you believe how much milk costs in America? And wow, Maharaji, no. They were doing this for the longest time, and I'm in the back thinking, maybe this guy isn't quite who I think he is, right? Maybe he's a little senile after all. I had only been there for a very short period of time, and I just got my PhD from Stanford, and I felt pretty smart. I'm thinking, why are we talking about the price of skim milk in America endlessly here? It freaked him out. All of a sudden, I have this thunderbolt in my mind that was clearly coming from Maharaji. It's hard to explain to someone who did not have that experience how it wasn't just my imagination. But this thing happened in my mind. And it was as if Maharaji said to me, we can talk about important things. We can talk about God and love, but that just busies up the mind. There's this ocean of love that's always available. So if you talk about something trivial, we can just dive into the ocean of love. All of a sudden, I felt this intense bliss wash over me. I was in this blissful state for many hours after that darshan. That was really a lesson for me. So it was all going underneath what stuff was going on the surface. I mean, it is true that many things came out of him in the moment that were obviously very beneficial for us to know.
On that subject of Maharaji being so grandfatherly and laughing at us and being just amazed that Balaram could like slice up an apple and do that the Hindu devotees have been doing for years. Yeah. That, you know, like you said, it was like if your dog came and talked about something. You were mentioning the 16th Buddha Karmapa, who was such a great Lama and one of my gurus, and lived in Sikkim, which is near Bhutan and Nepal. And he, like many Asians, are a little shorter than the average American. And I am a little taller, maybe, than average, being 6'2". But so, and young, my friend and I, he was also tall. We were visiting the Karmapa in his room, at his monastery, Room Tech in Sikkim, which has many levels, like a wedding cake. And he was up in the top in his room, you know, multiple level colored concrete wedding cake, Tibetan temple. And he was in his room and we were hanging out with him and he was sitting on his bed and some Indian officials came and kind of officiously, and they were dressed up and the woman had a beautiful sari, looked like Mrs. Gandhi. And the men were wearing sort of suits and Indian style suits. And they spoke English, which the Karmapa did not. They were Indian officials, high officials of Sikkim, India, and they were acting a little proud or arrogant. So, and the Karmapa had chairs brought in for them to sit on, and Brian and I were sitting on the floor, like right at his feet, because we had been there already. We're hanging out with him, and kind of spoke some Tibetan, and then the translator came in sometimes. But they started telling about what I could catch, you know, who they were and how important they were, and one was in charge of everything and the other one was in charge of everything else, and so on, and Mrs. Gandhi and Nehru, and they were dropping names, and in the middle of this, and they're telling Karmapa, who's like a very important diplomat, Lama, head of things over there, like the Dalai Lama is a great sage, but also a diplomat, the head of Tibet, right, in exile. So in the middle of their telling all this, and it was going on and on, like you with the price of milk, but they were talking about Gandhis and Nehrus, but it was kind of the same level of just stuff, to the Karmapa, who was a Tibetan refugee, who was just sitting there, a monk sitting in his room with his disciples. In the middle of it, Karmapa says, Surya Das, can you reach that light bulb? And I'm sitting on the floor, and I look at my friend Brian, and I said, yes, Your Holiness. And he says, stand up and take that light bulb out. They're always amazed that we can do these things, because they're like the grandchildren. It's like, oh, look, the grandchild can, read, or like kick the ball. He's a genius. Just to interrupt this flow of Bekar Bhat, as Maharaj used to call it, this general nonsense. So I reach up, and of course it's a refugee-built concrete building, so, not for any code or any plan, and a blueprint probably made with a pencil and a ruler. And so it's only about 6.5 feet, 7 feet, whatever. And I reach up and I turn it, and I just light bulb and take it out. Like it's a prize, and I hand it to His Holiness. And His Holiness says, give it to Brian. And then he points at these ministers and goes, see what they can do? Not just me, but like all Westerners can do this. They are so advanced. Forget about going to school and things that Lama's never heard of. No media in Tibet in those days. Brian goes up and goes, and puts it and sit down, and then we sit down on the floor again. And Karmapa says to them, see? They have so much good karma. They're more tall than you are. You should make more good karma by doing generosity. So you're tall is good karma. If you're short, that's like not Buddhist theory.
That's great.
And he was like chastised, and the ministers kind of stopped talking and were like, they got some kind of, like lesson in humility or non-caste consciousness, because they were looking at us like hippies, and they were Brahmins, that goes along with the class consciousness of England, Britain, Imperial, and India, the caste system. So they were so chastised, and then as they went out, they went like this. And they crept away. Then they got in their like armored, convoy and drove away. It was amazing how tall we were. And not only that, we understood, like, we were like a Tesla and Edison, we understood light bulbs.
I can tell the exact same story about Maharaji. We're sitting around some Indian people, he's talking to them, we sit down, and he goes, these people came all the way from the West, and I am going to give them the keys to liberation. You, nothing, because you're worthless. You come here and you just want shit from me. That's what he said. Oh, boy. So many of you know Jai Uttal. He's known as Jai Gopal to us. He's also taken part in these immersions and been with us forever. So he went, he was with Maharaji for some weeks, and he came to the temple one morning, and Maharaji had left. He said, sometimes you don't know how much you love somebody until they go. In some ways, that was the beginning of my spiritual life. The super well of anguish, not because Maharaji left, but because he allowed that door to open. We just talked about that. I never thought of myself as a singer till many years later. I was a musician. I was always afraid to sing. But at that moment, I began to feel singing connected to my real emotions. In the bhakti world that Maharaji opened for us, our emotions are so important. Suddenly, this dormant part of me woke up painfully and miserably. And then this feeling of, where's Maharaji? I love Maharaji. I need Maharaji. Where is he? Maybe 30 years ago, he said, I was with Siddhima in Vrindavan. And she was showing me Maharaji's books. Maharaji wrote Ram Ram and diaries. only during the three years that Westerners knew him, he wrote every day, Ram Ram. And then it gets to this one page where instead of the Ram Rams being written in this direction, it was written in an opposite direction. So I said to Ma, what happened then? She said, oh, that's the day you came, Jai Gopal. I started crying. It was like 7 centuries of tears poured out of me. Just the fact that she would know the day I got there, just the fact that I was noticed made me fall apart. How did they notice I was there? The soul realizes that it was actually seen by the power of Maharaji.
I never heard that from Jai. That's beautiful.
Now to sort of connect this all up, which I just, when Surya Das came down from his talk earlier, I said, well, we have a tape of this, and if we play this to your Buddhist colleagues, you'll be expelled from the Buddhist canon. And that's that combination of, I mean, and Surya Das really represents this, of holding the love and yet discriminating wisdom, I would call it, that we get from what, certainly for me, because I also am very much into the Tibetan wisdom, and back in the day, we started, we did the Vipassana meditation. That was he never told us to do it, by the way. It was more like, I wonder how I can get rid of these people. He
used to send us here and there, right? Like,
yeah, and he'd
Anandamai Maz in Benares, go to her ashram.
Yeah, exactly.
Muktananda's in Delhi, go and have his darshan. He's a great saint.
Yeah.
Serve all the saints, but also with the jiao.
Yeah, the jiao. And, or he would say, you going to the course? In English, he'd say, course?
Oh, yeah.
You going to the course? And off we'd go to the course, and then we came back. I remember one time we came back from the course and sat down. He was, again, with some Indian people. Oh, so you know how to meditate now? Show me. So we all went like that. And within 3 seconds, this high-pealing laughter. Look, they can meditate. It was nuts. You were there too, Parvati. But I have become, over the last number of years, really feeling so much presence of this one Tibetan master that he spent a bunch of time with. His name is Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. I would highly recommend get any of his books. And there's a wonderful film, do you know, Brilliant Moon, I think is the name of it. Yeah, it's incredible, And Trungpa Rinpoche is in this film. And you talk about devotion and how Trungpa made fun of us. And Ramdas said in that talk yesterday, but I heard how his devotees talked about him, and I saw him in action. And he was so reverent towards, you see it in this film, towards Dilgo Khyentse. I mean, it was incredible. So this is Dilgo Khyentse's, just something I picked up from him, talking about devotion and the guru, which is the essence of everything we've been talking about here. Devotion is the essence of the path. And if we have in mind nothing but the guru and feel nothing but fervent devotion, whatever occurs is perceived as his blessing. If we simply practice with this constantly present devotion, this is prayer itself. When all thoughts are imbued with devotion to the guru, there is a natural confidence that this will take care of whatever may happen. All forms are the guru, all sounds are prayer, and all gross and subtle thoughts arise as devotion. Everything is spontaneously liberated in the absolute nature, like knots untied in the sky. How great is that? Can you just talk about being with him? Okay, because I have a little bit of a regret that I didn't actually, I could have, but didn't really know about it at the time. Too busy in worldly stuff, maybe.
Well, there was a lot of stuff going on in those days, and a lot of gurus, and we were doing a lot of things. And Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche mainly stayed in the Himalayas, so he visited America a few times. But he wasn't here, living here like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche was, who was much younger. I remember Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who was the master of our 3-year retreats, and one of my root gurus, is so loving. His presence was huge. He filled up the whole space, but he always had time for
He was
everybody.
6'5" or something.
Yes, in Tibetan, they called him a man and a half, mi chiktang cheka, because he was tall for an average Asian. And he was the Dalai Lama's Dzogchen guru, which is an advanced non-dual awareness practice, Dzogchen, the great perfection. And he was so loving. He was so wonderful. I remember he said once, and this is on our subject of devotion and guru yoga, he said, one tear of devotion washes away kalpas of negative actions, of bad karma. And that really touched me. That really touched me. One tear of devotion washes away oceans of negative actions, bad karma. So devotion is so panacean or so powerful. And it reminded me that I am someone who never cries, rarely cries. And I learned not, I was told not to cry when I was a boy, and like playing sports and boys don't cry and just do it and plunge into the line, jump off the high board and, just go down the advanced ski slope, whether you're ready or not, this kind of thing. So I learned not to cry and also keep my emotions in check. So these days I've been trying to get a little more in touch with the divine feminine and be more vulnerable. But I do cry in movies. I think I might have mentioned this. My wife, my late wife, used to say, "Oh, that's because no one's looking." But I only cry from devotion. I occasionally get a few tears of devotion, and that really is a huge thing for me. And then I was thinking, Dilgo Khyentse was so wonderful. He was so learned. He was so immense. His presence was so immense. His activities benefiting others were so immense. It's worth seeing Brilliant Moon. It's a wonderful film or video, and it has some practice components showing how to visualize and how he merged. You'd be interested in this. He had 3 main gurus, and it's animated, so it shows pictures of those great gurus in Tibet. And then through the animation, he's praying to them and practicing guru yoga, and they merge into one and merge into him through these 3 chakras. So it's really like instructive of how he meditated in this way in guru yoga, merging with his own gurus. And also the 3 of them in one in the guru principle, not as just as separate people. And then I was thinking, oh, what a great teacher, how he explains things, and he's unique, and how we all rave about our gurus. And I don't know if people still do this, but in India, everybody always had a picture of their guru, and like baby pictures, and everybody be sharing their pictures of their gurus. And oh, if you go there, you can see my guru or my guru. So I was thinking he was such a great teacher, and he had talked about that teardrop of devotion wiping out so much negative conditioning. And then I heard that actually it was first said in the 12th century by the female saint of Tibet, Yeshe Sogel. And I was very surprised and touched that actually it had come from a more feminine source than us big guys. And it was like, that's why I noticed it. It was different than his usual teachings. It was from a female lineage, a female tantric. So I've always been very moved to seek those tears of devotion. So I myself always have pictures around and with me, but more important, to turn it into the presence that moves one. That's the principle of bhakti or guru yoga, not the image, but being moved to experience the presence, the blessings. The darshan is the word, divine audience. The vision of the saint in person or in energy level in vision. Even now, I'm getting a little tear here, which is so uncharacteristic of me.
Sweet.
And
And
there
that-
are female Buddhas. Of course, you know, in Hinduism, there's a pantheon of gods and goddesses. But Buddhism has been a very patriarchal tradition for a long time. But there are female Buddhas like Tara, like Kuan Yin, the most popular Buddhist image in Far East, which means China and Southeast Asia. Kuan Yin, we all know of her, the female Buddha. So, of course, there's no gender in the ultimate.
Here's something else from Dilgo Khyentse that's beneficial. He said, "It is always beneficial to be near a spiritual teacher. These masters are like gardens or medicinal plants, sanctuaries of wisdom. In the presence of a realized master, you will rapidly attain enlightenment. In the presence of an erudite scholar, you will acquire great knowledge. In the presence of a great meditator, spiritual experience will dawn in your mind. In the presence of a bodhisattva, your compassion will expand, just as an ordinary log placed next to a log of sandalwood becomes saturated, little by little, with its fragrance." This would be a great analogy of why we're doing this, and why we seek out to be with teachers and masters that they're living in this presence. And when you go into that field, which, like, I used to go to Khyentse, I mean, just about every year for, decades. And people say, "Well, where'd you go around?" They ask me, "I'm going to India." "Oh, so where are you going to, Khajuraho, some of these great sites, incredible architecture, this." But I only went for one reason, and that was to be with Siddhima, because it was to be exactly in this, what Dilgo Khyentse describes, just to be in that aura of a being that was free of all the me, self-referential, and Siddhima lived for only one reason, that was Maharaji. I mean, it was beyond one pointed. I mean, and you should talk, Nina, will share with you, I'm sure, if you talk to her, her experience with Ma, and maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow, because we're going to do some stuff together. That was my whole life revolved around that opportunity, And of course, what's really necessary is what Surya Das discussed the other day around spiritual discrimination. In India, the term is viveka, and that needs to be there as well, which is why it's always a great reason to embody yourself through practice of meditation. And also what Ram Dass gives us, which to me is one of the greatest gifts that he's given, is an ability to look at your perspective and seeing how you see the world. And that's why yesterday he did loving awareness. Hopefully he'll do it again today. His last number of years teaching has been so much about getting out of our heads and into our hearts, spiritual hearts, and which, just it means that little, and you talked about this, just it's a little turn, right? Mm-hmm. A turn of a perspective is huge. And you can see where you're stuck in believing in the thoughts and believing in our stories, chasing those habitual patterns and neurotic tendencies. So Ram Dass is so wonderful because he has such a great grip on psychology, our Western psychology, and is really able. And in that movie, Becoming Nobody, is a wonderful microcosm of the way in which we self-identify and become stuck that way. So perspective is a huge deal alongside of spiritual discrimination. Another Dilgo Khyentse. All difficulties come from not thinking of others. Actually, you can just stop there, huh? Whatever you are doing, look constantly into the mirror of your mind and check whether your motive is for yourself or for others. Gradually, you will develop the ability to master your mind in all circumstances. And by following in the footsteps of the accomplished masters of the past, you will gain enlightenment in a single lifetime. He was very optimistic, though, wasn't he? A good mind is like a rich ground of gleaming gold, lighting up the whole sky with its golden radiance. But if body, speech, and mind are not tamed, there is very little chance that you will achieve any realization whatsoever. Be aware of your thoughts, words, and actions at all times. If they take the wrong direction, your study and practice of the Dharma will be of no use. This is partly why I really love him. He is totally uncompromising about this. I mean, I read something of his and I talked to Krishnas about it. It was, you know, you really ought not to fixate on all of these attachments in life, because when you leave, after 3 weeks, when you die, nobody will even give a thought about you. So why are you bothering to, you know, do all? And when you die, you know, there's some rough stuff that goes on in those bardos, which he could explicate for us, maybe not now, but. So I said to Krishna, wow, did you read this Dilgo Khyentse thing? It's really like, whoa. And he said, well, we do have one thing, and that's Maharaji said, I will never let go of you. And we have that blanket to hold on with. So he saved me in that day, right? Anyhow, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. I just had to, you know. Come on, give us some kind of anecdote of an interpersonal thing with Dilgo Khyentse.
Well, first of all, I'm thinking about that, what you read, that after 3 weeks, nobody will care about you. That's a little stark Buddhist renunciation talk. But he was so loving, and, you know, he had a wife, and he had 2 daughters, and he has grandchildren, and he was very fatherly also. And his grandson is the abbot of their monastery, rebuilt now in Nepal, in Kathmandu, wonderful Rabbi Rinpoche. But one day we were, so in a way he was, you know, in the world but not of it. But then we talked about cities. So cities means like unusual masters with superpowers and who don't feel separate from others and treat everybody like part of themselves. So just to make the point in sort of a caricatured way, this is a true story. I was there in the early 90s with one of my friends, another Lama and translator, Jakob Leslie from Denmark. And we were seeing Khyentse Rinpoche every day. And one day, if you've been in the third world, especially in Nepal, there's a lot of shit and mud and puddles and lack of toilets and a lack of hygiene or other things, you know, undeveloped, developing countries. So this was in the 90s, so Nepal is somewhat touristy, but still third world. And Jakob found a dead centipede, or millipede, I don't know the difference. It had a lot of legs. And I'll tell you, I didn't examine it too closely. It was like in the crack between the sewer and the cobblestone of the refugee village where we lived, near Khyentse Rinpoche's monastery. So Jakob, being a good Buddhist, picked it up with like a piece of paper or cardboard and wrapped it in a tissue and brought it to Khyentse Rinpoche to bless, to pray for, or something. So we go in and we go upstairs into his room, and there's a few monks and nuns there, whatever they're doing. And we bow, and then we go up and put our heads down. He puts our hands on, has some blessing. Then Jakob takes out of his, like, Joel, his shoulder bag, this tissue, and I said, oh no, here it comes. This like turd that he found floating in the pool, in the Hollywood pool, the turd, the story. And so he takes out this centipede, millipede, this like has a lot of legs, a giant bug, and of course it was in the sewage and the garbage. So there wasn't even like a clean bug, like you pick up an ant in your nice spick and span house and put it outside, And it was dead also, so it was probably already starting to rot. So Jakob gives it to Khyentse Rinpoche and says, Rinpoche, can you blow on it and bless it? Because that would be sort of a way of blessing. And then we thought we would take it outside or something, bury it, or I don't know, put it somewhere. Yeah, with a little stuff. So obviously we were like trying to be, I wasn't, but we were trying to be like good Buddhists and save this thing and send it on to a better rebirth. That's the thinking. That is the thinking in the subcontinent of India, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and other styles, Sikh. And we give it to Khyentse Rinpoche, and Khyentse Rinpoche, opens it, and he's a very big man, whatever you said, 6'5", and he has big hands and big fingernails and a gold ring on each finger there. He's a swashbuckling tantric master, not a little humble, skinny ahimsa master like Gandhi. And he takes it in his gigantic hands and he goes, and pops it down like an M&M. And he prays, may this being enter the temple of nirvana and go with me wherever I'm going. And Jakob and I look at each other and go like, holy shit. Like, whoa. Tantra squared. All one, In Dzogchen, we have a saying about oneness. We call it one taste. We looked at each other, it's like, oh, one taste. But that was Rinpoche's genuine way of benefiting it. And he was a very big old man who could hardly walk without help. He wasn't going to go out and take it out and put it in the garden. He put it into nirvana, into the stupa, into the temple of his own body. Not thinking, oh, this is dirty, or oh, I might get sick and die. It was like deliverance. He delivered it directly.
That's great.
True story. I was there.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Another time, it's not always like so blissful. I was talking about how I never cry and things like that, but you should never believe anything, I say. So it comes to mind that once I was in a long retreat and Khyentse Rinpoche came to visit us, and so I had my half-hour private interview with him, and I went in that room and kneeled down, and he was sitting on his bed, and a lama named Tukupe Mwanga was translating, and he kept falling asleep while the translator was talking, because he was an old lama and he had traveled from Nepal and he's probably in jet lag, and he is always going like the Dalai Lama. He only sleeps about 4 hours a night. So while and he was 80 years old, while the translator was telling me answers to my very important questions, no doubt important questions, Khyentse Rinpoche kept falling asleep, and then the reverend translator, who had so much devotion to him, would go to the next question. Anyway, then I must have asked him something really like to the heart or honest or something, and he said something, and I just started crying. And I went out of there crying, and I sat out on like the curb crying for about half an hour. I don't even remember what it was about, because it wasn't about anything. It was like the dam had burst, the bubble had been poked with this trident, or something. My ego bubble had been poked. I don't remember what I asked or what was said. It was amazing. I don't know what it means. I'm just telling you. It stands out in my life. I probably cried more right then than any time else in my life. Nor was it particularly sad afterwards. It was so cathartic.
Yeah.
So the blessings of the guru. It's not always smiles or a peach or a sweet. as Ram Dass was saying in the talk before. What did he say? The difficulty or the enemy could be your best teacher. This is a Buddhist saying. He said something about this, how we can welcome the difficulties, not just run away from them. It's a Buddhist saying that the Dalai Lama often says that the enemy, the crisis, the disease can be your best teacher, your guru. It teaches you humility. It teaches you that you're not in control of everything. It teaches you to let go and surrender. It teaches you the things, there's a mystery in life, not always what you expect. So not just to push away the unwanted, or not just to recoil instantly, but to have some awareness of being able to embrace that too, and learning from that. That's how we learn to love our enemies. Gurdjieff, who was a teacher of the old centuries, who had studied, who was Middle Eastern or Russian, the great Gurdjieff, you can read his big books like Tales to Beelzebub and Journey to the East. I think it's called, no, Meetings with Remarkable Men by Gurdjieff. When his institute in France that had dozens of people living in it, doing what Gurdjieff called the work, working on oneself, the work, awareness work. They had one person there that was considered by everybody a real pain in the ass and a real troublemaker. It's a true story. And everybody tried to put up with it and be nice, like the way we do. Whatever anybody does, we accept it, we embrace them. Finally, the community broke down. They went to Gurdjieff and said, we have to get rid of so-and-so. He's making everybody crazy. And Gurdjieff said, he's the last one we should get rid of. We should get rid of each of you one by one. He's the greatest teacher here. It's like the irritant inside the oyster that makes the pearl. So I thought that pearl principle was a great teaching. It's the irritant that makes the pearl, the virtue of adversity, gaining through loss, etc. So I won't mention any names, but there are some people here like that. But we try to be very tolerant of you because we're so humble and loving and wonderful.
In all of the ashrams that I've ever been in,
it's very common.
It's always, there's a whole perfection of several people who provide that.
Provide that service.
Yeah. Kenji. So we got a little bit of time left. How about if people have some questions about anything we've been talking about? There's one right there. Oh, wait, we should, let's provide a microphone. Yeah.
So, Ram.
Put the mic. Come right in front. Yeah. And put the mic right up to your mouth.
So, I spoke with you before. The balance between being codependent and being selfless and giving. We should talk about that and your point of view.
That's a real challenge and a huge question and worth thinking about. I think I mentioned yesterday about unconditional giving, or the message of the Gita of giving without expectation of return. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, do your duty, do what you have to do, and leave the rest to me, to God. So that's, different than codependent. So what is that? Detached or unattached, or royal giving, with no strings attached, or unconditional love, not conditional, I love you, you love me, come on, you first. Like, I'll give you the flowers, you first. Give me some, transactional, egocentric love with strings attached. So, since you mentioned codependent, There's a big difference between codependent and the wounded healer and the burnt out healer that can't say no and has not good boundaries and is always breathing out and giving, and the caregiver, the caretaker who gets burnt out, or the caregiver, we call it, who's more giving and taking and breathing out and breathing in and more balanced. So you don't burn out that way because you're more in touch with the infinite abundance or the source. You don't think you're doing it, so it's not so stressful, and you don't think you are entirely responsible for them being happy or healed. They have to participate too. There's a myriad factors, so we don't feel overly responsible. That's codependence. So the less you expect a result, the less codepend, the more like proactive the giving is in caretaking. That's very important. Difference between caretaking and caregiving. Just like we make a difference in the spiritual practice between reactivity and responsivity. Not just blindly reacting when something pushes your buttons, but taking a breath or having a moment of mindfulness or the backward step, taking a pause, sacred pause, before choosing how, when, and if to respond. That's mindful anger management. That's very helpful. To expand it a little, we all need to grow up, as I mentioned before, and individuate and become someone before we can even talk about or try to become nobody, and realizing our inseparability or no separate selfness. So it's important to grow from dependence, psychologically speaking, to independence. But independence, you could be stuck in a teenage independence, like just reacting against and doing everything different. You're still very conditioned and dependent. We move from independence to realizing interdependence and autonomy. That's how we realize autonomy more than teenage independence. And so we don't become burnt out, wounded healers, or victims, which is so much in our imagination. Now, of course, there are victims of crimes and all, but what we're talking about here, like, if you can't say no to people asking you to do things, it's really hard to blame them. They're allowed to keep asking, but it's incumbent on you to say yes or no, not just have to say yes. So that's how you get burnt out. So breathing out and breathing in, not being codependent, not depending on being needed, for example, as a form of codependence. Needing to feel indispensable with the secret fear that people will abandon you. So if you're indispensable, you think you won't be abandoned. That's a neurotic knot that could be loosened and untied. That's a codependent thing. So I think the interdependence is very important, and being autonomous but in interdependence. Because we're not independent, we're interdependent, we're interconnected. There's a lot of things that conspire to bring us here. You might say, I came here of my free will, and that's fine as far as it goes. Nobody obliged you to be here, like you have to go to school till you're 16 or something. But there's a lot of things that contributed to be here. You might even, maybe you could be grateful to whoever told you about it, whoever sent you here, whoever passed on the email or Facebook that came from Love, Serve, Remember, that passed it on to you about coming here. So I think, as the Dalai Lama said, and I mentioned yesterday, we need each other to become enlightened, because we need develop warm, empathic compassion, not just cool, calm, discriminating awareness wisdom.
Let's close this with one more story from Love Everyone. Again, from Balaram Das. And this is around Maharaji talking about meditating like Christ, which I had to correct him on. Maharaji never asked, how did Christ meditate? I asked him how to meditate. He said, meditate like Christ. He was, there was no fear when he was on the cross. He was lost in love with everyone. And then the next day we got Ram Dass to ask, well, how did Christ meditate? And that's when tears came to his eyes. And he just kept, I'm just getting the story straight.
Thank you.
Officially.
And we appreciate that.
Between you and Krishna Das.
Very
And tears
loose.
came to his eyes, and he just over and over and over He said he never died. You don't understand. He never died. He kept saying, you don't understand. He was lost in love with every sentient being. He died for all of us. And we were like blown away, because you see someone like this actually crying, not to mention we were all Jewish, everyone around him. And we really had no idea of Christ until that moment he manifested Christ. So here's what Balaram said. When Maharaji said to meditate like Christ, Christ lost himself in love. Everything was included in that. It wasn't somewhere else. It was all consuming and included me, because we did not feel very lovable. It was love, and love is what we were experiencing in those moments with Maharaji. Unconditional, spacious, all-inclusive love. The Pope never said Jesus lost himself in love. My friends who were brought up Catholic, it was guilt and shame and sin. When Maharaji said that, it changed my thinking. Love, all-inclusive, non-specific, involving everyone, each person, including yourself. Lost in love, he became the supreme Atman. He recognized the oneness of it all as love. That's probably one of the great definitions of our experience in India with Maharaji.